Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. Many of you are aware by now that I have a few health issues that I'm dealing with, and as a result of that, I'm not getting to put up much video content. So what I'm going to do, and this is something that's been suggested by many viewers, is for me to go back over some of my old videos and present them. That's what we're doing today. So sometime last year I showed you how to make this insulated lunch bag. It's really simple to do, and I think I made it because it was a request by Mum. So this one's got just a couple of little webbing pieces for the handles. You can make your own handles if you want to. It's got a Velcro closure at the top, and it's got a nice big spacious area on the inside. So I'm using a product called Insulated, which is an insulated product for the stabilizer on this. You don't have to use that at all if you don't want to, but if you would like it to be insulated, you can use something like that. So that's what we're going to be doing today, is making this insulated lunch bag. I'll put all the measurements up on the screen. You'll get to see the video, which is the same one that I put up a year ago. I'm just chopping out the original introduction and the original conclusion on the video and presenting this one. So I hope you guys are okay with me doing that. I thought it was a great suggestion, and it just helps me continue to put a little bit more content up whilst I'm going through chemo and that sort of thing. So without any further ado, let's get straight to it. Here's what we're going to need today. I'm not using a fusible product today, so I'm going to need to quilt my fabric. And for that reason, my fabric is going to be a little bit bigger than what I need. This is what I'm using for my lining. The lining you can cut to the correct size. The lining fabric is 68 by 41 centimetres or 26.5 by 16 inches. I'll be using this really cute strawberry fabric for the outer bag. When finished, we want this to be 74 by 41 centimetres or 29 by 16 inches, but I have cut my fabric a little bit bigger on all the sides just to allow for the fabric to come in a little bit when I do the quilting. I'll start off with a piece of fabric that's about 30 by 17 inches. We only need one of those, and the lining we only need one piece. For my stabilizer today, I'm using Insulated. It's an insulated lining, and I do have it on my website if anybody in Australia needs to get access to it. For that, I'm also cutting my fabric a little bit bigger, just like I've done with the outer fabric, 74 by 41 centimetres or 29 by 16 inches. We'll be trimming both of these pieces back later. We need some fabric for handles, and you've got two options here. I found some red strapping that I've had for years, and I think it'll go perfectly with the fabric. You can either use a 1 inch or 2.5 centimetre wide strapping, in which case you will need 16 inches or about 40 centimetres, or you can make your own. If you're going to make your own, you want to cut your fabric out at 10 by 41 centimetres or 4 by 16 inches. You'll fold it in half, fold the raw edges in and fold that in half again, and you'll sew down both long edges. If you want to have a little bit of stability in there, then you'll need to get some stabilizer and just put that on the inside and then fold it up and sew it together. Today I'm actually going to be using this strapping. The last thing we need is some Velcro. The ends of our handles are going to be inside the lining of the bag, so we don't need to do anything with the end. And now we can get started. Take your Insulated. You don't have to use Insulated, you can use whatever fusible product you've got. I'm going to draw some quilting lines, and it really doesn't matter what lines you have or what angle or anything, or even how far apart. Let's go with, I think today I might go with 30-degree lines. I seem to be doing 45s a lot lately. I've got a 30-degree line on my cutting ruler here. I'm going to line that up with the straight edge of my fabric along here and mark my first line. Once I've done the first line, I no longer need to use that 30-degree line as a guide. I'll just use the straight lines on my ruler, and I don't like to quilt too heavily because it takes too long. So this line I've marked here, I'm going to place my 2-inch line over the top of that line, and then I'm going to mark another line 2 inches away from the first line and second line. So I'm going to continue this all the way across the fabric. I'm marking my lines on this because it's a lot easier for you to see, and usually when I use chalk I have trouble getting that off. I've done a 30-degree angle going across one side, and now I want to do them going across the other side. Using any one of these straight lines, I'll line that up with one of the straight lines on my ruler, and I'll just start anywhere and make my first diagonal line. And just like I did with the other side, I'll go in 2-inch increments, and I'll do that way, and then I'll go this way. Now, not everybody has a cutting ruler like this, so you don't have to worry about that. All you need to do is use any type of straight edged ruler or stick, whatever you like, and it doesn't matter how wide it is either. So you can place your measuring stick along the fabric, mark the first line, and then just roll the ruler or stick, mark the second line, and keep on going like that to mark all of your lines. Much easier than measuring too. So if you don't have a cutting ruler, that's fine, you don't need it. With all my quilting lines drawn, I can now put my fabric and Insulbright together. With the printed side faced down, grab the Insulbright and place that directly over the top, and make sure that's all nice and even and that there aren't ripples and puckers, and we'll pin this together. I like to use curved pins because it helps the fabric remain flat. This has all been pinned together. I'm ready to take it to the machine now and quilt it. I'm going to use a really long stitch length, probably about 5mm, but there's nothing wrong with you using the maximum stitch length that your machine will do. It helps the whole quilting process go a lot quicker. It also helps prevent a lot of that puckering that you get, or the shifting that you get in fabric when you quilt. So I'll start off with one long edge here, and then I'll do all the lines beside it. Then I'll come around and do the other side. Now, ideally, if you're going to be quilting, you'll want to put a walking foot on your machine. Because this is an industrial straight stitch, I don't have the ability to do that for this machine, but what I have been using for the last couple of quilting projects is my vinyl foot, or a Teflon foot. I figure that if that's supposed to help the vinyl fabric glide through more easily, then it should be okay for quilting, and so far it's been successful. Could just be my imagination, but I'm going to stick with it. I have a regular universal machine needle on, which is a number 90 or a size 14, and as I said, my stitch length is going to be at 5mm. Because I'm quilting on white fabric, this is going to strobe a lot, so I'm not going to make you watch me do all of this quilting. All I do is go down one line, then go up the next, and so on until I finish the whole lot. I do try to remember to go down one and then up the other. That way I'm not going to have all of the fabric skewing in one diagonal direction. It'll keep it a little bit more square. Now that this has been quilted, I need to trim it back to 74 by 41 centimetres or 29 by 16 inches. And I'll start off with one long edge first. I need to make the first cut in my fabric to be able to square up the rest of it. So this side's nice and straight. I flip that around, and I'm going to line up the straight edge on the side that I've just cut, and then measure 16 inches across, or 41 centimetres. So if you have a cutting mat like this with all the lines behind it, it does make it easier for you to just go and cut straight up. If you don't have a mat with the lines and you need to mark your own lines, then just line up 16 inches on the edge of your fabric and then start cutting along here. And you can do small increments as you go. And again, you can use a marker and then cut it out with scissors. but I do like to use the line on my cutting mat as a guide, and then I move my ruler over here and use the line on the other side to line up my ruler and then cut in one go. I've got two long edges that are nice and straight. I'll trim off a little bit from one short edge, and I've used the straight edge along here and along here to give me a nice square cut. And then I'll trim this side down to 29 inches. I really only just made that too. We'll set that aside. We can put our handles on now. And I'm going to mark about 13 centimetres or 5 inches in from the outside edge. I'll do that on both sides. And at the other end. Grab your handles and pop that over the mark you've made. It's up to you if you want to have it to the side of the marking. I'm just going to put it in the centre. And we'll repeat for the other side. I'll quickly take these handles over to the machine and just sew straight across there. Okay, we've got our handles in place. Let's grab our Velcro. It's really up to you how long you want your piece of Velcro to be, or even if you want more than one piece on there. But I think I'm going to just put mine in between the handles here. I'm going to cut mine at 4.5 inches or about 11 to 12 centimetres. The Velcro I'm using is only 3/4 inch wide or 20 millimetres. If you want to go for something bigger, that's completely up to you as well. But we do have a seam allowance to take into account here. I'm using a 1 centimetre seam allowance for this bag, which is 3/8 of an inch. Where I've made that mark for my stitching line, I need to place my Velcro below it. I've secured that in place with some double-sided tape. Pins will be fine as well. And on the other side I'll do the same. Okay, I'll go and sew that piece in place and this one as well. I like to go back and forward at my corners just to give it a little bit more stability. Because the Velcro is pulled so often, it'll help prevent the threads from breaking. And if you haven't already done so, you want to reduce your stitch length back. Mine's about 2.8. And same again on the other side. All right, we've got our Velcro in place as well now. What we need to do now is just double check the measurement of our outer fabric compared to our lining. When we put the lining and the outer fabric together, the outside is going to be folded over like this, and the lining will come in underneath there. That's why our lining fabric is a fair bit smaller or shorter than the outer. Your seam allowance at the top and the Velcro that you use is going to determine how far down you've got to fold this piece of fabric. So I folded my outer fabric in half. I'll do the same for the lining, and we'll just have a look at the sides of our two pieces of fabric. I've got the fold along here and the raw edge at the top, and I've just clipped that together at the bottom here just so that we can measure how much of a fold we need here. And you can see the raw edge of the fabric is right along here. I'll make a mark along here. I can remove that fabric and the clips, and this is our fold line. I'll measure that, and that's 3 centimeters or just under 1¼ inches. So now that I know that, I just have to remember that for later, and I can attach these two pieces together. Before we do that, I just want to find the center of our fabric, and whilst I've got this fabric folded, I'm going to mark the center at the bottom because we still have to do box corners shortly, but I don't want to do those until I've sewn my side seams. Make the same mark at the bottom of your lining, and now we can take both pieces of fabric and place them right sides facing. So you can see the lining is quite a bit shorter than the outer fabric. That's not a problem at all. Take the lining and clip all of those layers together. Turn that around, and we'll do the same with the other side. Bring your handles under, and we'll sew right along here and along this side as well. And I'm sewing with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. I do have a magnetic seam gauge, but sometimes I find it's a little bit cumbersome, or it's just in my way. I've made a couple of markings on the bed of my machine, and the first one is my 1 centimeter. I'm using that as my guide for sewing straight. With the lining and the outer fabric joined together now, we can turn this inside out again. Spread the lining away from the outer fabric. Line up these edges on the side. And we'll clip that in place. And repeat that for the other side as well. Okay, I've clipped the edges all the way along on one side, and on the other side I've clipped the edge all the way along on the outer fabric. On the lining fabric I've left an opening along here. What we need to do is sew all the way down here, and we also need to box our corners. And the reason we're sewing the side seams first is we need to know where we're going to start cutting our box corners from. Ours are going to be about 3 inches, or you can make it 7 or 8 centimeters. Shortly, we'll be cutting out this section here on all 4 corners of our bag. So when you're sewing along here, you don't have to go all the way to the end. Do a back stitch across here so that you've got some secure stitches when you cut this out. Come up to around about here with a back stitch, leave an opening, back stitch around here, and come all the way down to the other end. When you get to the other end, we're going to have the same size box corner. We can sew beyond this, but just do a few stitches back and forth here to reinforce that section. Do the same on this side. You don't have to do this at all. It just means that when we cut our fabric out, these stitches will start unraveling straight away. So if you go back and forth a couple of times, you save your time there. You don't have to sew all the way to the end, and your fabric is still secure enough so that you can open out your box corners. You don't need to mark the bottom, you only need to mark this section here where we're going to go back and forth with our stitches. Let's go back to the machine and sew this side and most of this side. So the little marker that I've got is here. I'll start sewing just before it. I'll do a few back stitches and then continue on to the end. I always like to go back and forth whenever I have bulky seams joining. So here's the mark I've made. I'll go beyond that and then I'll go back and forward a couple of times. And I'll do the same for the other side. This is where I want to leave an opening, so I'll backstitch here. And move forward a few inches and backstitch here. Okay, hopefully you've remembered to leave an opening along here. We can now mark our box corners, and I'm just going to extend this stitching line to the end of the fabric so that you can see what I'm doing here, because we need to cut our 3-inch box corners, but we need to make sure we allow our seam allowance, which would be our stitching line. We'll measure 3 inches, or that's 7 or 8 centimetres. Your box corner can be whatever size you like, it doesn't have to be what I say. And from the bottom where the folded edge is, we're going to measure that same amount. And we'll do the same on the other side. And measure again from the stitching line. And at the other end we'll do the same. Sometimes people ask me why I go to the trouble to mark all 4 corners. The reason I do that is because I'm creating a tutorial here so that you guys know what to do if you don't already know. And by being repetitive, you can see exactly how to do things. When you're confident or you know what to do, you can use your own cutout templates. I've got lots of cutout templates for different sized box corners, which I enjoy using when I do my batch projects. So that's why I go to the trouble sometimes to actually mark each corner and even cut each corner individually. Usually when I'm doing these for myself, I don't even mark them. I just take them straight over to the machine and use my stitch plate or whatever markings I can find on my machine as a guide. Let's cut this out. And finger press a crease at the bottom of your lining, or you can use a pin to make a mark. And then we'll line up this side seam with that crease that we've made and secure those edges together. You can see along the corner here, the fabric meets up all the way to the end. Sometimes that doesn't happen and you might find that the fabric will step down a little bit, and that's usually in your seam allowance. So if you haven't taken your seam allowance into account, you'll have one side have more fabric than the other. I've done that many times. I usually just sew it and then trim it back. But it's almost always in your seam allowance. And we'll do the same for the other end of the lining. And we'll do the same on the outer fabric. So you can see my stitching starting to come apart here because I didn't backstitch properly. And last one. Let's sew up all of these box corners. Okay, the corners are done. Before we turn this the right way around, we're going to take this corner on the bottom of our outer fabric and this corner on our lining. Bring those together. Now you could have done this all in one go before, but sometimes it gets a little bit complicated for people, so I'm doing it separately today. And all I want to do is just secure the outer fabric and the lining together right along the edge here. You can sew directly over that stitching line there or come closer to the outside edge. Flip it around, line to the other end and do the same thing. Bring this one across to here and just place the two pieces together. And the reason we're doing this is to help the lining sit in the bottom of the bag. So I'll quickly go and sew that in place on both sides. Okay, so the lining and the outer fabric are securely in place now. Find the side where the opening is and turn everything the right way out. And then you can just push out your corners. Your lining will be attached to it, so it'll be a little bit awkward. As I was turning this through, I had a bit of a panic. I looked at my bag and I thought, oh no, I've got the Velcro on the wrong way. But then I remembered that I'm actually folding my edges in and then the Velcro will secure itself on the side. I have something in mind for the side of the bag. What we're going to do now, we've got all the lining inside here. If you remember what your measurement was when we lined up the lining and the outer fabric, we can go and fold the outer fabric to the inside. Now my measurement was 1 1/4 inch or 3 centimeters. And what we want to do is take the lining fabric and have that separated from the outer fabric. So you just spread them apart like that, because we want to fold the outer fabric, but we don't want the lining tucked in underneath. So I'll measure my 3 centimeters and then I'll clip the outside section in place. And I'll do that all the way around the entire bag, making sure that I don't have the lining behind the outer fabric. All right, I've secured the edges all the way around. The Velcro is on the inside there. Rather than allowing my handle to sit inside, I've folded that back. So where that's sewn in place here, I've just lifted that up and clipped that in place. We'll be stitching that in place as well. So we can take this to the machine. The first row of stitching that I'm going to be doing is right in the ditch here. So where you see the lining fabric and the outer fabric joined, I'll go right inside that ditch there and sew all the way around. Once I've done that, then I'll come along and I'll top stitch just at the top edge as well. After that's done, I'll close this opening up here on the side. So I just pinch those edges together and sew straight down. I've increased my stitch length to 4 because I'd like the job to go quicker. It's also a lot more forgiving when these fabric pieces start to ripple. And I'm starting on the side seam. So I've come back to my starting point. Rather than ending my sewing here and starting a new row at the top, I have a side seam here, and this is what I like to do when I'm making my supermarket shopping bags. I'll just raise my foot and I'll sew and drop it down again, and then I'm going to sew on that side seam right in the ditch. Raise my foot again, then I can continue on and do the top stitching along the top edge. It means I don't have to tidy up any loose threads or start and stop my work at all. It's really good when you're doing batch sewing too. On this row of top stitching, when I'm sewing my handle in place, I'm going forward, back and then forward again. Because it is at the top section, there may be a little bit extra tension there, so I'll just triple stitch that for added safety. And when I get back to where I started, I'll just backstitch and finish up. And while I'm here, I'll close up that side seam. Our insulated bag is finished up to this point here. So you can just close it up at the Velcro edges at the top here. And if you want to, you can actually extend your Velcro all the way along and close the bag up like that. So if you want to, you can leave it exactly like this. I'm going to change it up a little bit and make it a little bit more square. And I'm finding that the lining is still a little bit baggy, so I've got a solution for that. I've just got some wooden skewers from the kitchen. We have our boxed corner along here. And what I'm going to do is tuck in the lining right down. I'll run my finger right down to the corner and I'll pinch that together. I'm going to take one of these skewers. I'll put the blunt end at the bottom of the bag. So I've got the skewer right down the bottom here and I've got it running right along the inside of the edge of the bag. I haven't tried this before. It's an idea that came to me in my sleep the other day. It actually woke me up in the middle of the night and I thought, yeah, this is a brilliant idea. Let's see if it is. So the skewer is sitting inside the edge there, and what that's done is forced the lining to sit right up against the edge of the fabric here. Of course, where the centre seam is here, you want to make sure that's a nice straight line. So just double check that you've got the same measurement all the way across. And if you're happy with that, we can sew from the bottom all the way to the top. Now we only need to do a 1/4 inch seam. Before you sew, you want to remove that skewer. It's only there so that you can actually get a nice edge on the side there. I'm going to do that with all 4 corners, and I'll take the skewers out as I sew. So again, I'll just poke my finger down to the end there, tuck all those edges of fabric into the corner, and give it a quick measure to make sure the distance is right, and then you can clip it. You can see now that this bag is sitting up nice and firmly. Of course, it does help that the skewers are in place, but when I remove the skewers and sew down the sides, it will actually make this box sit up much more straight. And it's also reduced a lot of that puffiness that I had inside the bag as well. So I've measured the same distance from the centre seam out on each side, and I've just clipped the skewer in place. It's just so that I can hold that lining fabric in place without me missing it when I'm sewing. So as I go to the machine, I'll pull the skewer out and then I'll sew just a narrow top stitch all the way along the side edge, and I'll do that on each of those 4 corners. Once I've done that, I'm going to have a look and see if the base of the bag needs anything as well. If it does, then I'll just pinch those edges together at the bottom. I won't use a skewer or anything. I'll just fold that across and sew across here and on the other side. There's no need to do that on the boxed corners. So let's go to the machine and do the 4 sides, and then we'll decide whether or not the bottom needs to be done. I'm ready now to remove the first skewer. I'll just slide that out, keep everything in place, and at the top I'll do a back stitch a few times just to really secure that. And then sew down. And when I get to the point at the bottom, I'll backstitch and then do the next one. I've also decided to do the 2 sides at the bottom as well. All right, we're all done. And here is our final little lunch bag. I did decide to sew the bottom edges as well as the sides. It really just helps stabilize the bag, and it gets rid of a lot of that puffiness that we had inside from a lining that was a little bit too baggy. So I've removed all the skewers. The linings have been sewn in there, and that's much neater than it was before. So you'll be able to fit lots of little goodies in there. Being insulated, it'll keep your food nice and cool. And all you need to do is just tuck in those sides and close up the Velcro. If you had lots of goodies in there, you can either just leave that open wide like that. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now, who remembered to keep their offcuts from the boxed corners? Because if you did, you'll be able to make this little pouch that goes with it. That's just made with the corners that we've cut out earlier. I did do a video showing you how to use the box corner cutouts the other day, and I'll pop a link up in the corner somewhere and also down in the description box below. So if you've remembered to keep your box corner fabric and you don't want to throw it out, make up a little pouch to go with it. So I hope you enjoyed me going back over one of these older videos. I think it's actually a really good one to keep in mind. It's a really versatile bag. I've been keeping this in the boot of the car for, well over 12 months. And whenever I need to, I just use that for my cold groceries and that sort of thing. And Chris and I, actually, we take this to tournaments, our table tennis tournaments as well sometimes, if we just need light snacks to take with us. So let me know if you think that's okay that I have shared this video, and if you'd like me to do that with a couple more videos that I might have. I mean, there's about 500 to choose from, so I might just to tide me over until I can get more content created, change a few more videos and present those as well. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.